turned out a punk. Zach, thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
No, I feel like I've been wanting to do this for a really long time because, like as we've talked about before, Rise Against and Gwar and a million bands. We could spend the entire podcast just listing off bands, but there's a certain band from your past that played a huge role in me and my brother's life. And so when I told him that you were coming on the show, and he's like, "From Hagfish? That's amazing!" So, but we will get to that, I'm sure.
Okay, we'll get to that. And that to me, so a little backstory. I, like many people and like pretty much everybody I know, am a huge fan of your band, of Fucked Up. And meeting you guys, I was like, I'm this guy in Rise Against, and that band is, everyone's favorite band. There's no way that and so meeting you and you stopping me kind of mid-sentence and going, wait a minute, you were in Hagfish, right? And I was just kind of like, that was the last thing I expected this dude from my new favorite band to stop me and say, and I was like, yeah. And so immediately I was in love with you. I was just like, this is my favorite person in the world because, like anybody, your first musical endeavor is always the soft spot, it's the closest to you. I did it with my brother. He was our bass player. It was a band I quit high school for, and had some, nominal success or whatever, and did fairly well. And it was all I did for, 8 years of my life right out of high school. And, regionally, and there's pockets of people that remember Hagfish for what it was. But, you're from Canada. We went up there maybe once. I just was so blown away and not expecting you to even know who I was, much less this band that I did when I was a kid, so it was just awesome. And forever, just, I think of Damian, I think of, it's like a Dreamweaver situation from Wayne's World. I'm like, I love that guy. I just love him.
In that back alley in Austin, Texas. Well, you won me over when you said You're in Trouble. My first band was your favorite band.
Exactly.
It was like both ways.
Exactly. We go both ways.
Yeah. But I guess we're going to get to all that. But I guess I want to start them off the way they all start off, which is, Zach, how'd you get into punk?
Oh, Jesus.
Remember the first time you ever kind of came across it, even?
Yes, I do. My brother and I are from a town about an hour north of Dallas, Texas, called Sherman, Texas. Mm-hmm. And like most small podunk towns, and it could be podunk town anywhere, mine happened to be in the deep south and in Texas. You were kind of fucked if you were a weird kid.
Yeah.
You were definitely going to get your ass kicked. You were definitely not going to get laid by anyone. And you were going to be interesting. There's no way to kind of come out of that without sort of being a little bit interesting because you had this chip stacked against you. My brother and I were gawky, weird-looking kids. And our dad, fortunately enough, was a radio DJ. And that's what he did for a living. Mm-hmm. He was sort of failed musician. And, he wanted to be a musician, but didn't have the sort of tenacity to sort of figure out how to play an instrument.
If only punk was around then, he could have.
I know, right? Because he was a guy that would have been a punker. Like, my dad carried 6 knives at all times. Whoa. He was a biker. He had long hair. He wore dark glasses, sunglasses, every minute of his life. He was blind legally in one eye, so he wore dark. He was just this really cool character.
Yeah.
And was definitely, if there was a counterculture back then in Sherman, Texas, my dad was pretty much the counterculture. Yeah. So he brought a record home called No Wave.
Oh,
and it was a compilation. Do you remember that record?
Oh, well, like the one, like there's the No Wave. It's got like a punker kind of surfing on it with glasses.
Yes,
sunglasses.
How the fuck do you know that record? He's on a fucking ironing board.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know if I still have it, but I have had that record. So
holy shit, Damian. Well, okay. So in another weird turn of events, like my idol is Stefan from the Descendants, and he also happens to be a friend now because we'll get into it. They recorded Hagfish. Long story.
Yeah,
but. He also, that was his first punk record, was that record. So me and him just had a conversation about, I collect that record. If I see that record, I buy it, no matter how much it is. I've got a few copies now, one of which is an actual picture disc, and the other side of it looks like a pizza. It's
Yeah,
insane.
they did a picture disc version. I've never seen the picture disc version, but I had
Oh,
this
I've got it.
growing up. I had this book called The International Discography of New Wave, and I think that's listed as a picture disc in the back. But now that I know that, every time I see that record, I will buy it for you. And what is it? That's all like people that do that with Catcher in the Rye, right? Like that's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, like where they just
People obsessively buy it, and then like a bunch of people that have assassinated prominent officials have it in their pocket. So maybe you're a Manchurian candidate of another kind with the No Wave Records comp.
Yeah, that's me and you.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what's crazy? It's so like the bands that were on that record, the Squeeze, the Dickies, the Police, the Stranglers. Those are still my favorite bands. Among my favorite bands, like in my top 10. And so that was the first sort of punk record that I'd ever heard. And that kind of led my brother into, whoa, what? There's this shit is out there somewhere.
Yeah.
So we kind of got way into those bands, which led into Elvis Costello and Lennon and all that stuff. And then metal, like thrash metal happened. And think Allah or God, whoever, I don't really believe in anyone, but whoever it is,
a higher power, if a higher power is there.
In a higher power, yeah. But my brother and I got way into that. And fortunately enough, there was that crossover thing happening. So you had metal and punk. And we weren't fortunate enough to be from any coast. So we weren't from, if you're from the East Coast, you were sort of, by blood, you were born into a scene. And on the West Coast was pretty much the same thing. For us, we were just these dorky fucking dipshits that just liked heavy, fast counterculture music. So we got into it all. I remember I bought Slayer, Rain and Blood the same day I bought Black Flag, My War. So if it was offensive or fast or satanic or telling everyone to fuck off, like I was down. Whatever they had, I was in it. So I'm glad I did. It definitely varied my interest. It skewed my interest that I wasn't just I'm into this type of punk rock. So I think No Wave was where it started, but then, of course, that was the gateway drug, for me, into My War, into, Black Flag, into Minor Threat, Dickies, and into Slayer and Metallica and Anthrax and all the great thrash metal that was happening at the time as well, and death metal. I was into Possessed, I was into Death, I was into Dark Angel, I was into all that good shit as well. Obituary.
Were there any local bands, like, at the time, like, that you were seeing, or I guess not maybe in your town, I would imagine? Or...
Well, oddly enough, Pantera would come.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I lived 45 minutes away from Dallas. There was a place called the Electric Company, and Pantera would come and play. Now, my brother and I had an aversion to glam metal, to glam rock or whatever. And at the time, this is the 80s, they were that. They had a singer named Terry Glaze. This was before they had Phil Anselmo. They were putting out records like Projects in the Jungle and things like that.
That record's now worth like thousands of dollars too.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Pretty terrible.
They would go hang out at the mall. And I remember all the girls like, a Pantera at the mall. And I remember my other dirthead friends. I had, these stoner thrash metal dudes that my brother and I ended up starting a band with. Called Harm's Way with a Z, I might add, where we did Slayer and Creator covers. Anyway, I remember.
Did you guys record it all, or
what's that?
Did you record it all with this band?
Fuck no, dude. I wish we did, because you know what? These guys were like, they were the band that would covered songs perfectly. Like they would spend all day and would cover Metallica songs and Slayer songs. My brother and I wanted to be in their band, and eventually we joined, and it was just this huge deal for us. But and they practiced every day. They would just practice like 7 hours a day, which was great for us. We were just dorks, and we wanted to do that.
Yeah.
We weren't getting late anyway, so it was like, fuck it, we'll just do this.
I guess, when did you start playing? Were you playing like the whole way through, or?
I started playing when I was 9.
Okay.
Wow. I was 9. My brother was 11. My dad was kind of one of those football dads with guitars. He was one of those strongly suggestive, like, hey, I missed my window, but you guys are going to do this. And I remember just him showing up with a guitar. My brother wanted to be a drummer at first, and that didn't work out, so then he just got a bass. It was like, this is what you're playing now.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And it was great because we were really, really poor, our family. My dad hawked my guitar probably once a week to go get, like food money. And I'm not saying that for like, oh, poor me. It was just a fact. He was a radio DJ. They made like $250 a week, and my mother was a florist. So we lived in an apartment complex, which I don't know if you've ever seen a Texan apartment complex. If you ever seen the movie Office Space, where he lives, that's pretty much exactly what it looked like where I lived.
Okay.
And my brother and I shared a bedroom. So we would just jam all day. We would just, teach each other stuff, and he always had a better ear than me, so it was really beneficial. Anyway, so I always find I talk so fast when I'm talking to you,
no, it's
and
fine.
it's a great thing. You and me have had this ongoing conversation since we became friends.
I know.
It's ceaseless, and it's lovely. It's amazing. Anyway, it's a mutual energy, is what it is.
It is. It's like when two hyperactive creatures are locked in a cage together. What happens?
Exactly, and basically we'll just talk each other to death.
Exactly.
And it'll be great. And we'll just be talking about some weird Japanese reissue of something, and one person will die. And then we did. Oh, and then these guys were telling us like, "Yeah, man, Pantera are kind of getting heavy. Like they just played, and they have this new singer from New Orleans." And sure enough, they just started playing Slayer covers and Creator covers, and we went and we would go see them. And this is in our hometown. However, there was a band called Rigor Mortis from Dallas.
Oh yeah, I know.
And they were the shit.
Yeah.
And we went and saw them. This was Slayer on the South of Heaven tour. So I'm thinking 89 maybe. And my dad drove me and my brother and our best friend Billy to go see the show. Specifically, Rigor Mortis were opening. And these guys were from Dallas. And they were fucking amazing. I mean, Mike Scascia was the guitar player, R.I.P. He just died a few years ago. He became a very good friend, and he ended up playing in Ministry. He toured the Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste tour, and then was a key figure in the band's career from then on out, like Psalm 69 and all that. And he was probably the greatest guitar player I've ever had the fortune of, knowing. And their bass player was a guy named Casey Orr, who ended up, I idolized these guys. And within a few years, my brother and I had started Hagfish. And they ended up liking our band. And when Hagfish broke up, Casey played a big role. He had joined Gwar at that point. Mm-hmm. And that's how he was like, "Hey, we're looking for a guitar player." I mean, we'll get to that, but that's projecting. But either way,
it's kind of amazing that band. You think about that band and how many, it's always interesting when you have one person come out of a band and go on to do other things in music, let alone a couple.
Oh, I know, dude, and that's how great they were. That's just how you knew that then. And you're like, God, these guys are just Dallas fucking Texas hicks like me that somehow got out. Mm-hmm. And now they're opening for Slayer.
Yeah, because I guess it's like you take it for granted, like, and I think Toronto being, the Canadian major media market that it is, like when you're born in a city like this, how easy it is to take your band to like whatever stage you want to take it to that next stage. Whereas if you're in other places, it's a little more of an uphill battle. Yeah,
absolutely. It puts easily 10 steps in front of you.
Absolutely. And I guess it's probably a little easier, like level the playing field as far as geographics go a little bit.
Sure. I mean, for me, it's easy to be this curmudgeonly old guy that's like, well, man, people are just, getting music for free and all this other shit. But it's like, it really has made things so much easier in the fact that a band could be from Sherman, Texas, and get noticed and get a community and get a tour booked and get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
as a matter of fact, there are bands from my hometown that are playing and touring and doing stuff, and it's amazing to me. It's just like I'm a little bit jealous. I'm like, where the fuck were you? What shit? I had to kill myself to fucking
kids these days with their
stupid music,
stupid bands and things.
Yeah, these fuckers.
But back to when music was music, the late 80s.
Exactly.
Where did you kind of go from Rigor Mortis? Was like, I guess, did you befriend them from that point, or?
No, we were just these wormy little dicks that, look, you guys are so fucking cool, and we weren't ready yet. But what happened was, my brother and I, we're going, I've never talked about like Harm's Way and stuff. So we had our thrash metal band in Sherman, and these guys were they weren't guys that were going to get out of town. You know what I mean? They were super stoked with like just being the sort of the bigger band in Sherman, Texas. And my brother and I wanted more. And we met this guy that my brother and I had never done drugs, drank, or smoked.
Mhm.
And at the time, we had no idea what straight edge was. We had never heard Minor Threat. This was before all that. Our parents did a lot of that. They were sort of, like I said, they were kind of like biker, hippie, culture. And we were around it all the time. So we just didn't want to do it, for whatever reason. And we met a guy in town who kind of had some money, and his parents, he had gone off to school in Los Angeles, and he had come back with all these great bands. This is probably 89. And he knew about this straight edge movement and all this stuff. And in Sherman, Texas, we didn't know what the fuck that was.
Yeah.
And he was this gateway drug to like all of this great stuff, specifically the Descendants. For my brother and I, that blew our minds wide open. That was just like, okay, we found our calling. This is our fucking way of life. This is our favorite band in the world. But it's weird. We kind of like got into Descendants, Minor Threat, and Bad Religion all at the same time. So we had these mixtapes of all those, just those bands.
Yeah.
And we gleaned what we wanted from each band. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Descendants were dorks that ate all the time that never get laid. Okay, that's us.
Yeah.
And Bad Religion had this earnestness and this fast thing happening. And their songs, they were kind of like the Ramones of fast music. It was all...
Yeah.
And every record had this focus and was rad. Minor Threat, everything was amazing about it. It was just this kind of from a different planet where they like had this crew of people that all saw eye to eye on it. It was just, we knew we needed to be around that. And so we started a band with this guy called The Government Flu.
Whoa.
Right?
That is
Dead
an
Kennedys.
awesome name.
Dead Kennedys,
Yeah.
And that actually does have a demo somewhere. I need to look for that.
I would love to hear that. So what was the vibe of that? Like, did you, I guess my first question is, did you identify as straight edge hearing Minor Threat, or was that still like an alien concept?
We did, because, I remember getting my fucking ass kicked because I didn't party.
Yeah.
No,
and I never got my ass kicked, but as soon as I found out straight edge, I'm like, oh, this is what I needed. This is
exactly
the backup.
Exactly. And I was like, I don't know where these people are, but they look badass.
Yeah.
And they look like no one's going to fuck with them. So that's what I am now. That's me and my brother. Like, we're Xing up. Like, we're straight edge guys.
Yeah.
Fuck it. We're 15, 16 years old. And, it really was this thing. Like, it was one of those life moments, those delicious life moments where you're like, I'm right. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I knew it. I fucking knew it, And, so Government Flu was a straight edge band, and we played one fucking show in Dallas at the cool Dallas punk club. It was called the Slip Disc. I don't even know how we even knew about it in Sherman. And at that show, because we had put straight edge on our flyers, we got kids from the Dallas straight edge scene, which was small. And specifically this one kid named Banning, he was a drummer, and he was awesome. And he was a straight edge kid, and he was X'd up, and he was like this kid in all the pictures we had seen. And he had a troubled past, and he was fucking rad. He was like unlike anyone we had ever met. And we quickly realized, like, we need to start a band with this kid. And that was Hagfish. That ended up being Hagfish. But when we started it, it was like, it sounded like Minor Threat when we started Hagfish. It was all fast. It was all shouted vocals. It went through a bunch of mutations before it ended up on what it was. Mm-hmm. But my brother and I started going to Dallas every weekend, driving. It was about an hour, and I was 15, 16. My brother was 17, just got his license. My parents weren't strict, but with that kind of shit they were. But they knew that this is what we wanted to do. So we were driving to Dallas and staying with Banning and his mom every weekend and working on this band. And started playing shows and getting kind of a little bit of a buzz and following, and Dallas straight edge kids coming out. It was awesome. It was like the coolest fucking thing in the world. But, as most bands do, we kind of went through some singers, and we met this guy, George Reagan. And we also, by the way, were having a healthy Descendants diet as well, and again, we weren't, because we're from Texas, we just liked punk.
Yeah.
It was like, there wasn't a specific type to us. It was like Minor Threat, sure. Bad Religion, absolutely. Dickies, bring it on, And Banning, we pretty much got way off into All in Descendants. And to me, it was like, if it had Bill Stevenson's name on it, I was down.
Yeah.
Black Flag, great. come on, even October Faction, whatever.
It's like a mark of quality.
Yeah, exactly. It seemed like Bill Stevenson's name was on everything. So I just I idolized him. I didn't know what he was like. I was like, I need to know this guy. Mm-hmm. And sorry if I'm talking too much.
No, please. This is exactly what the podcast is.
Okay, good. In 3 hours, you'll be like, anyway.
Steve McDonald has the 2-hour record, so if you break that today, I will be impressed.
He's got a much more interesting story than pretty much anybody, though, I would imagine.
Well, it's also the crazy things that happened to him along the way, like being kidnapped when he was 12 years old, and like
good Lord.
Playing in Courtney Love's band when she was up for the role of Janis Joplin in a Janis Joplin biopic.
Wow.
But anyway.
Okay, I haven't done any of that shit.
Yeah, but you've done a lot of stuff that I am really excited to hear about. So less about Steve McDonald, more about Zach Blair.
All right. You asked for it. Here we go. So we quickly, the sound of the band kind of started changing. Still identifying a straight edge, and still, just trying to write these sort of more involved songs, more melodic songs, more whatever.
So who were the other influences by this point? Were you, sorry, not to cut you off, but were you at this point hearing about being in the city, I guess getting access to some of the other records that were coming out, like Quicksand?
Oh, yeah.
And stuff?
Now it was all the early Lookout stuff. It was, at this point it was like Sam I Am had just started. Dag Nasty were kind of, I guess kind of ending their thing, and Smalley was in All, and all of that shit was happening. Cruise Records was happening, and this is probably 90. So grunge and all that wasn't happening yet. It was kind of starting. We were getting like Soundgarden was on SST, and Nirvana were probably pre-Bleach, or Bleach was happening at this point, I guess. There's a fucking great time for music at that point, and for punk and for just everything. It was just music. There didn't seem to be any specific thing. It was just like all of it was pretty good. Like none of it was kind of like, and it's, the Digits were happening, which I fucking love the Digits. And in Texas, we were fortunate enough to have the emos locations.
Yep.
And so you had those bands that would come through and get posters. There were those bands that always had the cool poster art. There was
that's
Kozik.
The birth of it, right? Is Texas like Kozik is down there, and
Coop.
Coop.
And so there were bands that they specifically did, and it was like the Super Suckers, the Reverend Horton Heat, Unsane, the Cows. All these fucking great bands that none of them sounded the same. The old early Helmet.
Yeah.
Amphetamine Reptile bands. Go ahead.
Did you ever see a band called Hash Palace that I think was from Texas?
Dude, Hash Palace were from Dallas.
Yeah, they have a couple 7-inches or 2 7-inch, I think. But I love that 7-inch.
How the fuck do you know who Hash Palace? Dude, I like run into those guys when I go back. And that's fucking nuts, damn. You continuously blow my mind.
Well, no, we were talking about, I felt like I was thinking about it. I'm like, I got to bring up Hash Palace because that's like the Texas grunge that I know from this era. So, give them a little shout out and love.
That's fucking insane. Well, I'll shout out a Canadian punk. You remember fucking Beyond Possession?
Oh, incredible band.
Dude, great band. Anyway, were they Toronto? They weren't Toronto.
No, but they've come up a lot because they actually took the Melvins on tour. Like they were really tight with the Melvins super early on, and they became, God, I can't remember. It's come up on the show too. I can't remember what band.
They were fucking rad.
Yeah, no, fantastic.
That was one, and that was a band. I remember I had that record. My brother and I listened to it all the time back then. But it was just it was just kind of like whatever was coming down the pipeline, we were open for. Like, yeah, let's take it. So by this time, we had morphed into kind of wanting to be more of a Descendants all kind of a situation, and weren't very good at it yet. But Banning, he had started writing Bill Stevenson, and he had started writing those guys, and lo and behold, they came through. This was Alroy Saves, so it was Scott Reynolds. And we were obsessed at this point.
Yeah.
We were fucking it. We had been doing Hagfish for, I don't know, maybe half a year. And those guys came
recorded
through.
By this point? Like, I guess.
No, not yet. And they played, and they had this old gray school bus, and it broke down. So they ended up having to stay with Banning. So they stayed with us, And we got to meet him and talk to him, hanging out, and so now they're our buddies, sort of, even though we were probably just dopey, fucking irritating kids to them. So we stayed in touch, and they toured like a motherfucker back then. Like they were they would come through twice a year easily, everybody's town. And they came back through, and this time we opened for them. And by now, we had met this guy, George Reagan, who ended up being the singer for Hagfish.
Yeah.
And George was this, like, he had been in a thrash metal band, like a crossover band that we all like called Uncle Scam, which is just such a great 80s thrash metal name.
It's also funny because there's also Uncle Slam.
Oh, there was Uncle Slam. There was Uncle Slam for sure.
Yeah.
And so we loved Uncle Scam, and we were like, "This is George." We thought George Reagan was a punk name, because it was like George Bush and Ronald Reagan, but it was his real name. And we were practicing. We didn't have a singer. We had gone through some singers at this point, and George kind of poked his head in our rehearsal room. He had a T-shirt printing shop in the back of this, like most shitty, rehearsal spaces that we've all grown up in. There's a guy that prints shirts, or there's a guy that lives there, the holes kicked in the wall.
Yeah.
It smells like beer. They're disgusting. George had a shop back there because Uncle Scam had long since broken up. He had gotten married. He had moved back. He's like 22 at this point. He had tried to kill himself. It was fucking tragic. He was a mess.
Yeah.
But he kind of poked his head and he was like, "Man, you guys are really cool. I've got some songs that sound like something you guys won't want to use. If you want to use them, they're yours. You can take them." It was this crazy serendipitous thing.
Yeah.
So he brought him in with this shitty acoustic, and he started singing them for us. And he had this fucking awesome voice, and he wrote these great songs, and they sounded like the Descendants. And he was like, they were his favorite band as well, and we were just like, holy fuck. And he didn't want to sing for a band. He was just giving us his songs, honestly. So we're like, "No, dude, you're our singer. That's all there is to it."
Yeah.
And he decided to do it. And within a few months, we opened for All. And Bill and Stefan at the time, they were producing like Big Drill Car records and all the great stuff that was on Cruise, Chemical People, that stuff. And they liked our band, oddly enough. We weren't really that good yet. We didn't have the fabulous drummer, this guy Tony Barsotti, who ended up being our drummer forever. He wasn't even in our band yet. And so they were kind of like, "Hey, kids, you keep at it, and we'll stay in touch." Well, Hagfish went through all this stuff, and finally, eventually, happened on Banning ended up leaving the band, and we found this guy Tony Barsotti, who ended up being he was like Tommy Lee playing Descendant songs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was just this kid from a glam band in Dallas that everyone would go to see him play. He was so fucking good. And I just remember being this enterprising kid, like, I've got to have that kid in my band, And it was the perfect chemistry. It just worked for our band. We decided to do the Suits, which if anybody ever saw Hagfish, we were like, well, if you go to a festival and you see a bunch of bands, you're going to remember the band in the Suits, whether you hate them or not. So it was really the only reason we did it. And at this point now, Green Day had been signed, and everyone wanted a pop punk band. And with George's songs, our band had definitely taken more of that turn. We were outright trying to rip off the Descendants. But our thing was we were trying to rip off the Descendants, but George was like, he looked like Luke Perry in the early to mid 90s. He was a good looking guy. He was a good he wasn't a guy that was singing about not getting laid or getting chicks and stuff. He was like classy, and we all looked like fucking trolls, but he was a good looking dude, So it worked, it helped out, with the band.
Yeah.
It was such an oddball band now that I think about it. Jesus, no way it would have happened right now. But at this point, All had gotten signed to Interscope, and they had gotten a big record advance like all the bands did back then, and they were smart. They put it into the Blasting Room.
Yeah.
And Hagfish was their first band they ever recorded at the Blasting Room. And it was because of based on a relationship we'd made with these guys, 4 years earlier.
So that's your first ever recording?
Hagfish did one record in Dallas with this really bad studio. There was a label in Dallas called Dragon Street.
Yeah.
That signed up every Dallas band. Tripping Daisy, which became the Polyphonic Spree.
Yeah. Well, they had also huge hits themselves, too, as Tripping Daisy.
Huge hits themselves, yeah. So they had this band, the Nixons, that were basically like Dallas's Pearl Jam.
Yeah, I remember the Nixons.
Remember the Nixons?
Yeah.
And then I don't know if I think Deep Blue Something that had that Breakfast at Tiffany song. They were on. So there was no rhyme or reason to the label. It was just like, if you're from Dallas, this label put you out.
How come no one talks
And
about Dallas as having like this insane run of like 90s
it
hit
really
makers?
did. In the 90s, there was a fucking, and I'm just skimming the surface. There was all kinds of
Yeah, but like right there, every band you mentioned there, it's like, wow, those bands all had like hits and like
huge
songs that
hits.
got played.
Well, and then, the Toadies,
Yeah.
which my brother now makes a living playing in the Toadies, they were the ones that were the most odd. There was two girls in the band that like were kind of oddball. They were just the weirdest looking band in the fucking world. Like they were all the most like socially awkward people, and they wrote these songs that sounded like a really dark Pixies with really fucked up subject matter. And then they had one hit, and they sold 4 million records, and everybody idolized the Toadies in Dallas. And that was at the same era, by the way. All these bands were happening at the same time. And, lo and behold, Hagfish, we were the least successful out of all these bands, and we wanted to go record with our heroes.
Yeah.
So we made the record with Bill and Stefan, and that started our career with them.
Did you do this first record? Did it come out with this Dallas label?
Yeah, the first record was called Buick Men, which was real clever. If you looked at it, it said "fuck me."
Okay.
And so it's Buick Man, and then if you looked at it a different way, it said "fuck me." That came out. It ended up being pretty much the same songs we re-recorded with Bill and Stefan.
Okay.
And if Buick Men is like, if you find it now, it goes for over, I don't even know how much. Somebody was telling me the other day it was like super expensive. But there's, it's pretty hard to find. I have a copy of it on like cassette.
Did it come out on vinyl or just CD and cassette?
It did come out on vinyl, but I don't think I've ever seen a copy of it on vinyl.
Well, that's going to be one of the want list act that I got to put on there now.
You got to do it. You got to fucking do it. It's a lot of the same songs, and we recorded half of it with another drummer that wasn't even banding. There was a guy in between them, this guy Scott Carter.
Yeah. And
he pretty much got fired while we were making the record because we're like, wow, this guy's. He was a good buddy of ours, but and so we got Tony and pretty much re-recorded that record with Bill and stuff. And Tony ended up being Bill's favorite drummer. I mean, to this day, he is. And I mean, shit, now that I think about it, that's almost 20 years ago, and I've been recording with Bill Stevenson since then.
Yeah.
Pretty much. My whole career sort of revolved around that guy.
Yeah, like I guess pretty much like your one producer.
Yeah, I mean, Gwar was the
Gwar.
only thing I did that wasn't with Bill. So it was like Hagfish, Only Crime, and Rise Against all have recorded. I've always made. So it's like every 2 years of my life, I'm spending 2 to 3 months in Fort Collins, Colorado with Bill Stevenson.
So with Hagfish, how did it go with the major label? How did that interest? Was that just because of like recording with them?
It was. They didn't want us to go with Bill and Stefan.
Yeah.
They wanted us to go with a hit maker at the time.
So how did how did the major label thing? Did they hear Buick Man, I guess, or?
They did. Dude, my whole career is so fucking like taped together and with string and shit. A graphic artist in Dallas had moved to Los Angeles, started dating a girl that worked for a management company. He played her his tapes of his favorite Dallas bands, and we were the ones she liked. She's awesome. Her name's Laurel Stearns. She manages Red Fang right now and a bunch of other bands. Yeah, she's rad. She worked at Capitol for a long time. She worked for this really eccentric, awesome manager who had like maybe one other band at the time, and he loved us and he was like, I want to book you a little quick tour out to Los Angeles, which at this point, Hagfish was all we all did, but we only toured regionally. There was an agency in Dallas that booked all the bands, but he only had like a reach of from Dallas to Chicago or Dallas over to Florida. So no coasts.
No coast.
We didn't go to the coast. But we could go to those places and get good guarantees because his thing was like, hey, I got this new band, Hagfish. You can have them this weekend. If you give me a good deal on them, I'll cut you a better deal on, the Nixons next weekend or Tripping Daisy next weekend or, And basically we would go up and we were this oddball band that wore suits and sound like the Descendants. We didn't sound like anything else that was happening at the time, which was grunge, way grunge.
Yeah.
And nobody gave a fuck. So we get booed and, but we did it so much that we ended up getting our own crowds in these places. So we had already gone to Chicago a few times, and I remember going to Sluggo's in fucking Pensacola, Florida. That was as far as our reach went. And in those places, we were already killing. We were doing great. We'd been working those places for years, but we'd never been to a coast. So this manager booked us a little tour out there, and he got one label interested in us, and it was London Records. So London had been the Rolling Stones and ZZ Top and a lot of bands label in the 70s.
New Order, too.
Yeah, exactly. And they had gone defunct. And now Island had bought London, and they were looking for bands. They had signed, do you remember the Mises?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
They had signed the Mises, and they had signed a few other bands. They had signed Wool. Do you remember Wool?
Wool,
yeah, the brothers from Scream.
And there's Greg Anderson too, wasn't he in Wool at one? No, or just the Stern?
Maybe, I don't know, but I know Peter Moffat, who ended up being in Burning Airlines with Jay Robbins. He was in Wool, and it was fucking rad.
Yeah.
So they signed. We were one of those bands. They were like, well, we might as well give it. To these people, we were just a Green Day. Mm-hmm. They were quote unquote pop punk. The singer was good looking. Let's do this and see what it looks like. But we made the record with Bill and Stefan, and it didn't do well. We went and toured our asses off. Dude, the first tour we went out and did was the newly reformed original lineup of Bad Brains. So we did...
When they were on Madonna's label, right? Or
yes,
Maverick?
Yes, yeah. God of Love. They did the Maverick release of God of Love, and we were shitting our pants. That was a band I didn't mention earlier. Bad Brains was a band we listened to fucking constantly. So, and they were amazing. Yeah. HR definitely, toward the end of the tour, that was the one where he got arrested going into Canada. He hit a kid in the face at the bottleneck in Lawrence, Kansas. He hit a kid in the face with his microphone stand. We did a leg of it, and then the Deftones, this was 95, so the Deftones were around back then. They finished it. And so we did that. We were a band that I'm really proud that we would tour with NoFX, or we go tour with Everclear, who were happening at the time. Or we tour with Bad Brains, and then we go tour with the Reverend Horton Heat and the Super Suckers. And, it wasn't, why they could put their finger on us, really.
Didn't Art from Everclear have an older punk band at some point?
He did. I think they were that weird genre, what is called cowpunk.
Okay.
And I do not remember the name of the band. Yeah. I do remember it was something about Jerry Garcia or something.
Yeah, anyway. Jerry Garcia, maybe?
Something like that, maybe it was. I want to see, they were something finger. Okay. Maybe? I could be totally pulling that out of my ass.
I got to look this up. I got to find it. Actually, the guy who was guitar teching for them, I don't know if he was guitar teching at the point you guys were on tour with them, Sean was Poison Idea's roadie from 84 to 1990. And now he's with the Foo Fighters.
Dude, and that guy is a good friend of mine still because he was our buddy. We did 3 months with Everclear.
Oh,
and
wow.
Sean was our buddy.
Best
and
dude.
Best dude. And we would plug him for information on Poison Idea. What Pig Champion was just constant. And yeah, he's still the salt of the earth. He's such a fucking great guy. Yeah. And he works for a great guy, Chris Shiflett, who, we've known since No Use for a Name days. And, just it's good things happening to good people. Mm-hmm. So Hagfish, it's a tragic story because we made the record. It didn't do shit for London, but it did great for us because now we had this vehicle. We could go to Europe, which we did, and we toured our asses off. We just, we were let loose. We had, a modicum of sort of tour support.
Did Stamp get any airplay? They
bought us a van.
Sorry,
what's that?
I didn't mean to cut you off there. Sorry, but
no.
I was going to say, did Stamp get any airplay or no?
Actually, it got ridiculous airplay in certain places.
I've definitely heard about it. God, I think maybe the first time on a CMJ comp, but if not there, just on the radio, I think.
No, we did a great CMJ showcase. It was us, the Meat Puppets, and Folk Implosion, which Lou Barlow's thing.
Yeah.
So it was great, and it was packed. We got tons of radio play. We didn't get added to K-Rock, which was the big... that's what you wanted.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, we didn't get added to K-Rock, and so that was a big letdown to everybody. But I remember WBCN and all the bigger stations like Seattle and Boston, they would do, our record was called Hagfish Rocks Your Lame Ass. And I remember those stations being W blah 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 and Hagfish rocks your lame ass, and those were bumper stickers they were giving out. It was a thing for a while. Record did not do anything. Singer had a kid, so the writing was on the wall.
Yeah.
But now we needed to make another record, and the label said, if you let us pick the producer and give this another shot, if it doesn't work out and you don't like what comes out, we'll let you redo this record with Bill and Stefan. Because we were like, well, we're just going to go to Bill and Stefan. And they were like, no, let us try this out. We're like, okay, fuck it. If as long as we had that kind of a guarantee, it seemed foolproof. So I've never told anybody all this shit, by the way, Damian. It's crazy.
I appreciate you sharing this. For me, this is like the behind the music that I would have wanted. This is the stories I care about.
That's so cool. I mean, me too. I want to hear this shit about people. It's interesting.
Well, no, it's just also this is I don't know, this is the sort of stuff that I find really interesting. It's like the bands that aren't necessarily as well documented. I've read a lot of you talking about being in Rise Against, and I've read a lot even about you talking about being in Gwar. But I'm like, God, you never really get a chance to go about the Hagfish story. So believe me, I'm eating this up.
It's for me, it's amazing somebody wants to hear it, honestly, because it's such a soft spot in my heart, and it still breaks my heart, because for me, my brother was the bass player. These were my best friends, we wanted to do it all, and for us, it was like we saw these other bands getting huge. It was like we're going for it. Not that we even thought we were going to be like as big as Green Day or whatever, but we definitely thought we could have a career doing it. We thought, we were touring with like NoFX and Face to Face and Rancid and bands like that, and going, we could do this. You know what I mean? This kind of a career, we could definitely handle this. Like that's all we really wanted. Which, if an Epitaph or somebody like that, or Fat, which ended up signing us, if they had been interested in the first place, we probably would have been on our way to do that instead of going through the major label shuffle and then coming out the other end bitter and fucked up. You know? We probably would have, if we had people that were actually fans of our band putting out our records and encouraging us, we probably would still be together right now. But anyway.
Well, that's why I guess geography. It comes down to geography again. Like, had you been born in a city that had like an East Bay or anywhere close to that even, or
Exactly. Dude, you're totally... It was that's what fucked us, because I remember touring with all those bands and every one of them going, fuck, dude, I wish I would have heard. If I would have heard you guys a few years ago, I fully would have put you on my label.
Yeah.
All the label heads of these, actually we got offered to be the first band that was on Vagrant, and we turned that down because we didn't, it wasn't a label yet. And then it ended up being the biggest, it was right before their sort of explosion. But anyway, so London offered us that deal. And we said, okay, let's go make this record. Who do you guys want? And a few names were tossed around. And what ended up happening was a guy named Beau Hill. Now, Beau Hill had done Winger, Warrant, and Rat.
The big three.
The big three. He wrote those fucking songs. He wrote them. He produced all of those records, not just like a record for Rat. He did them all, but he had also just done the Bad Brains Rise record. Now, not God of Love. He did the one with Israel Joseph I singing.
Yeah.
So he had a toe in sort of punk rock, and for some reason, the label staked their fucking. They staked their career on this guy. So he was a hit maker. And that's all they gave a shit about. We did not give a fuck, And as a matter of fact, at least for three of us, we were riding it out. We knew at this point, we had toured so much and we met so many people. We could have rolled it into a pretty cool career with a label we wanted to be on that liked us for who we were.
Yeah.
So we were like, well, let's just do whatever the fuck we want. He was the bad choice. He didn't work out for our band. I do have that record. I will play it for you, just you, and I wish it could be a Mission Impossible thing where it would just blow up after you listen to it.
Having not been in those situations, I guess I've really lucked out where I'm like, that's not the record I wanted it to be as far as like,
yeah.
What was it like? He was just like, You know what you guys needed? This part? Compression on these drums.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much whenever you could sort of dream up, he did.
Yeah.
W- and it's not, the guy's a great producer, and he's got a fucking amazing ear, and for that time and era where he was the guy for that time and era.
Yeah.
He brought that sort of ear to our music, and he knew nothing about our music.
Yeah.
He knew nothing about Descendants or All or anything that we came from. Ramones, even he didn't even know the fucking Ramones. So, which is that was the triumvirate. It's like Ramones, Descendants, All, Dickies, Buzzcocks. Not triumvirate. That was the five.
Well, yes, I guess you can be the best person of all time at recording bands, but if it's not your world,
sure,
it's not gonna turn out.
Exactly. And so the first thing he was like, "Oh, you got to slow these songs down. You got to get under these beats, man. You got to groove, And we were just kind of like, but by the way, in the back of our heads, this whole time, it was, man, let's just hear them out. We'll do this. If we don't like it, because we were all on board for like, let's just see how this goes. We can always redo this with Bill and Stephanie.
Yeah. And
it was just so glaringly obvious that this wasn't right. We fought with him constantly. Finally, we got through the record, and we did it in Los Angeles at a bunch of different studios and spent a whole fucking bunch of money. And that's just the way this guy was. Like, I remember he rented like the Rolling Stones outboard gear and shit for just crazy shit, man. And we were like, dude, we just are trying to be a punk band, like I think he thought like, oh, I'm going to make a hit record with this band, and he hadn't really had one since the 80s. And this is like 96, 97.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our whole point to the label. It's like, this guy hasn't had a fucking hit. You want a hit? This guy hasn't done that in a long time, And
did London put out those records back in the day? Is that why they were so hot on him? Like,
no, it's just somebody was there that also was completely out of fucking touch.
Yeah.
That also thought that, oh, he had a hit before, he can do it again. It's like, no, that's not fucking true.
Yeah.
That is true. Sometimes people can, lightning can strike in different eras, but not with that fucking weird, precarious major label situation where they're just, it's just music for money. It's just music for dollar signs. Yeah. And this was, dude, I was a kid still getting really sort of, getting a really bad taste in my mouth about all this shit because I'd always been told this, but for me, I had stars in my eyes. Just like, fuck, dude, this is a great ride. I was in Sherman, Texas just a few years ago. So like, let's go for it,
Yeah.
And sure enough, the record was awful. It was terrible. It didn't sound like us. We didn't even recognize ourselves. We couldn't stand this guy. By the end of it, we were done. And so we went back to him like, hey, there it is. So when can we redo this with Bill and Stefan? And they dropped us.
Oh.
Yeah. So they said, oh, wow, we don't like this either. And we're like, oh, no shit. And then they were like, but we kind of, at this point, London Records, the newly sort of re-embarked London Records was not doing well at all.
Yeah.
So they didn't, that's the fucking truth of it, Back then in the 90s, if you didn't sell mega platinum records, you were done because labels were doing that. Mm-hmm. Like 1 million records was still kind of like, you can do a little bit better, which is fucking insane.
The Breeders sold 1 million records.
Which band?
The Breeders.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And it's like they weren't a big band at at that time even.
Right. And by this point, Green Day were selling millions of records, and so it's like,
yeah,
you should be able to do this. So they were having problems, and they definitely didn't want to spend even a modest budget, which Bill and Stefan were. I mean, they were, their studio was not even a fraction of what we had just spent. They didn't want to spend any more on Hagfish or anything. So fortunately for us, we got to re-record the record with Bill and Stefan, and Fat Mike was now a friend because he liked Hagfish, and Hagfish had toured with NoFX at this point quite a bit. And he had Honest Dons. So, Hagfish didn't sound like a Fat Wreck band per se, but he had Honest Dons at that point for bands that were like not really the Fat Wreck sound, but they were still bands that he liked,
Yeah.
And for us, it was awesome. But by that point, we did the second record. It's just called Hagfish. It's the one with the like naked girl boxing on the front of it, which actually is my favorite record.
I love the music on that record's killer. I love that record.
Thanks, sir.
I,
That was
I wanted to ask though, just quickly before you go on from Honest
Yeah.
Don, like just because that was always like were you kind of like bummed out when he's like, hey, I want to sign you guys, but it's to my other label, because it's just like, I loved Honest Don's with like you guys and Chicks Dig It and Bracket, I think was even one of the bands on it at some point. I know I'm forgetting a bunch of others that I really liked, but like were you kind of like, oh, because Fat was just such like a brand.
It was. At first a little bit, but then I realized where he was coming from.
Yeah.
Because it was a thing, and
well,
we
there was
definitely
a sound
didn't.
by that.
Right, and
back
we did
then.
not fit in.
No.
We did not. I was sort of projecting on like, well, hey, if you start signing bands now that don't sound like that, that could only bode well for the future, and like that sort of a thing. But
And I guess that's ultimately where it went.
Exactly, and that's where it is now.
Yeah.
And but at that time, it was the wrong time. I mean, This is 97, 96. This is like, this is the heyday of that label.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A bunch of great fat bands were putting out a bunch of great records at that point. And I totally got it. And for me, I was just happy that we landed somewhere where we were comfortable, we were safe, and we could have put out records. Eventually we would have been just putting out records with Fat Records.
Yeah.
Of course, and like I said, at the time, it was like we had some other options. We had put out some 7-inches with BYO.
Yeah, is it just the one 7-inch on BYO?
Just one, and then we did one with Go-Kart. You remember Go-Kart?
Go-Kart, yeah. Got to find that Go-Kart 7-inch. My brother and I were talking the other day about the Hagfish vinyl output, and he's like, I think it's just that one 7-inch. And I'm like, oh.
No, dude, we did one. The Go-Kart one has a song. Now I'm gonna fuck up. Actually, I have it in here. Hang on.
Go-Kart Records was a sick label. Weston and
it was a cool label. Wait, is this the Go-Kart one or is this the BYO one? Oh, this is BYO. Okay, so Go-Kart had a 7-inch, had a song on it called Moon, which was my favorite song we ever did. Oh. And it only came out, I believe, on the Go-Kart 7-inch.
Oh, crazy. I got to find that 7-inch now. You're giving me tons of want lists.
You know what? There's also a BYO compilation that had Moon on it. So I can't remember. I'm fired, dude. I don't even fucking remember. But anyway, so I was just happy to have a home that was so much more comfortable, and we didn't have somebody breathing down our neck to be this huge, label saver.
Yeah.
And by this point, we remade the record with Bill and Stefan. All was in place. Let's go fucking just, work on our band. George, our singer, his wife was pregnant again, and he was going to have another baby. And it was just falling apart.
Yeah.
He just couldn't. He needed to, and he's a brilliant guy. So he always wanted to be an engineer. I think he was a software programmer on the side. So he had started doing that. And him and his wife wanted to move to Costa Rica. The band was just holding him back. It was always this thing where it was me and my brother and our drummer's main focus. And starting with all this bullshit, he had kind of, rightfully enough, started sort of thinking about other things in life and what he might have wanted out of life, when all we were thinking about was we just want to do this, which is all I've ever done.
Yeah.
I never grew out of that, And so I think about 98, we kind of we never officially broke up, but it was pretty done.
Yeah.
Which is a drag, because the second record came out in 97 and we went and just toured a bit, not even enough to, Mike took a chance on us and put out our record, and we just kind of, whatever. It was rolling to a stop, So I hadn't fucking worked a day job. I mean, Hagfish was the thing, like, out of the gate, we were paying our bills doing it only because we lived like scumbags. I mean, we lived in a garage with 8 people. So we basically squatted. We had a minivan that we would put all of our gear in and just go do these shitty shows and string together enough money to sort of pay our lowest living expense each, and we managed to do that for a long time. And now it was done. It was just done. So I got a job at a tattoo parlor. I was the guy that signed you up in the front,
Counter,
like
front of counter, right?
front of counter, yeah.
Front counter.
And we get tipped out and all that shit. And I
Yeah.
saved my money because I had this big plan that I was going to move to. So fucking lame. I was going to move to Los Angeles and call in favors and talk to people and see if I could get a job playing guitar for somebody. It was there, At this point, I wasn't really a writer. I wrote some in Hagfish and did stuff, but I wasn't confident with that. But I was confident that I could play guitar in your band.
Yeah.
I knew what type of band I wanted to play in. I didn't want to, but I just wanted to go tour. All my shit was in storage anyway. Whatever small stuff I had, I was like, I don't need much money. I can just go do this. This is all I've ever done. And I went out there with my buddy Toby, who Toby Bean ended up playing in the Street Dogs for a long time, and now he's a professional stage manager, tour manager. He's amazing. He works for everybody. But
wow.
He was going to join a band called Welt. You remember Welt?
Welt. Oh, it sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, they were a cool band. I think they're out of...
Also, just quickly, was that Oliver Peck's tattoo shop that you worked at? Did you work at his...
No, you know what? Although Oliver was a very, very good friend and always has been, and it's odd. My best friend in the world is a guy named Rob Marchant, and he plays in the Riverboat Gamblers now.
Yeah.
And also my other band, Dracula's, which we'll get to. He lived with Oliver at that point, and like he would live with me, or we'd live together, or he'd go live with Oliver or whatever. But Oliver's shop was always fine. I would have loved to have worked there because they were better friends of mine for sure.
Yeah.
And it was only a block away from the tattoo parlor. This was in the Deep Ellum area of Dallas. So it was like all the clubs, all the culture was in this like 3-block radius of Dallas,
Because from Power Trip, the sort of like sixth man, I guess, in Power Trip vibe, he worked front of counter at Oliver Peck's shop, so I guess that
shit.
It would be like a weird connection if you guys had both done that job.
Yeah, right. Well, I put it this way: I hung out there fucking
enough
time.
times.
And I wish I would have worked for Oliver. And Oliver's been a buddy for over 20 years now, but and just great tattoo artist. I worked at the kind of lame one down the street that wasn't as cool, but the tips were good, and I was saving my money, and I was still living like a scumbag, and did it. Got out to California and realized that, I was out there for like 2 or 3 months, blew all the money that I had made. I was staying with a friend, sleeping on his couch, a guy I'd met through touring. And lo and behold, Toby, his band Welt, they were starting a tour in Dallas. They were driving straight from Los Angeles back to Dallas. So I was just going back with my tail between my legs. I was going to sleep on my brother's couch. I was going to say sleep with my brother.
I was going to say you got real desperate.
Yeah. My brother was married. My brother's been married since the early days of Hagfish to the same woman, and she's fantastic. And she has supported me so many times, let me sleep on their fucking couch. It's just ridiculous and gross, So I was going back home to do that. And I called my brother, and he said, dude, Dave Brocky, like Odorous Urungus, called here and left a message saying he wanted to speak to you. I was like, what the fuck? I wish I still had that recording too, by the way. So it was the weirdest thing in the world. And what happened was Casey Orr from the past, from Rigor Mortis, he had been in Gwar for quite a while because, long story, but Al Jorgensen cherry-picked Mike Scascia from Rigor Mortis to play in Ministry. Ministry did some stuff with Gwar, and they needed a guitar player. And he had a buddy, like a protege, a guy he had been kind of teaching forever. This guy named Pete Lee started playing guitar in Gwar. And then when they needed a bass player, Pete remembered his buddy that was also in Rigor Mortis to play bass. So now there's 2 Dallas guys that I know playing in Gwar.
Yeah.
And Pete had gotten shot because, Gwar is a whole other. We could be on the phone for another 6 fucking hours, but it's crazy, dude. So Pete had gotten shot and had developed some health problems and some other habits, and he was not in the band anymore, and they needed a guitar player. And Pete was a fucking ridiculous guitar player, still is. He's amazing. So I was like, I just went and slept on somebody's couch in LA for 3 months to try to play guitar in a band. I never thought about Gwar, although I was a metalhead, always have been. I love it, from my past. And I was like, I don't know if I could pull it off because I would be replacing Pete, which was fucking ridiculous. So I was like, oh, sure. I mean, why not? And I got back home, and immediately they had sent me. By the way, Casey just loved Hagfish. He just would come to Hagfish shows, and so for my brother and I, it was this huge deal. Like, dude, the guy from Rigor Mortis. And for some reason, he saw something in me. He thought I could do it, and they gave me 40 songs to learn, and so I just started in earnestly, and they were over my head, dude. I mean, it was really ambitious, metal, and so I was like, okay, I'm going for it. About a week into that, they called me back and they're like, hey, don't worry about those 40 songs. Learn these 12. Just 12 other songs that I hadn't even heard yet.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, now the audition was like 3 days away. They had bought me a ticket 3 or 4 days away. A day before the audition, Brocky called me and he said, hey, those 12 songs, don't even fucking worry about. Nail these 4. And, if you can nail these 4, these were 4 more, by the way.
4 different.
So now I knew there was 52 I had been working. I mean, they had so many records, you know. One of which was they wanted me to learn the entire new record, which at this point it was a record called "We Kill Everything" that they had just done without a guitar player. Well, they had one guy, and I went up and I was nervous as fuck. And when it would get to the leads, I was super nervous about the leads because I was just like, "There's no way I'm doing these right." And Brocky would put his head in my cabinet to make sure I was doing them right. They had this like joke country song that was really fast, like chicken picking, like because Pete was a guy that could do that shit, and I had to learn that, and I'd never done anything like that before. And either way, we got through the audition. They deliberated and came back, and I had the gig, and I really was blown away. I had not thought it that far through yet. Like I never like what if I get the gig was not an option. And so I've cut to like 2 or 3 weeks later and I'm Flatus Maximus and Gwar and I'm in this big rubber monster costume and I'm walking to the fucking stage at the Electric Factory in Philadelphia, with these guys. It's like, and it was rad. It was like being in Kiss. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was, and I'll be able to say I did it one day,
Did they like it? Was it, well, I guess there's a lot of questions coming out of that, but like, was it hard playing in a giant suit? Did that take a while to practice? Like, would you practice in the suits, I guess?
It was almost impossible. Yeah, we did. For me, I got the gig and then it was like, now it was time to go to work.
Yeah.
Because you needed to be able to play those songs like second nature and they're fucking hard songs.
Yeah.
So then it was dress rehearsal, and that was basically just rehearsing with the shoulder pads. And the shoulder pads, they're just football, shoulder pads. Mm-hmm. But they're heavy as fuck. Yeah. They have these huge rubber prosthetic head things on them, and my costume had all these dinosaur parts on it and shit, and it was ridiculous. And I had these big rubber flipper, like, dinosaur feet, and I couldn't fucking walk. And so we rehearsed with the shoulder pads. And I had this big chest plate on my shoulder pads, so I couldn't see over that.
Yeah.
So I had to learn how to play the entire set without looking at the fretboard, not once, because I couldn't see it anyway. Unless I picked the guitar up and visibly, turned the guitar toward myself, I couldn't see what the fuck I was doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then on top of that, they gave me my mask, the Flatus Maximus mask, and it had cheekbones that stuck out about 3 inches. So I was fucked.
Yeah.
So it was like, I was like, I'm way over my head at this point, dude. Way over. I'd only been in Hagfish, really, which was like power pop songs that were all bar chords,
Had you seen Gwar live prior to this, or?
I had, and like anyone else, I was blown away.
Yeah.
It's the most amazing fucking show. Still to this day.
Still to this day, yeah.
Unbelievable.
And I was super.
It's always a great show. And you know what? To this day, that is the most, and I've said this 1,000 times, DIY band. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone on that stage made everything on that stage.
Yeah.
And everyone on that stage packs that shit up, and they load that truck, and they unload that truck. There's not one prima donna rock star in that band.
Clean the venue, too, right? Like, that's the other thing.
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah. I mean, dude, it's if there is a band nowadays operating the way bands used to operate, if they could drive that bus themselves, that's the one thing they pretty much don't do themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which they used to drive. They had their school bus, and they used to drive that themselves. So it was one of those things like, leave your shit at the door. You want to be in this band, prove it. And it was a great experience. It was awesome. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And still to this day, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, Rise Against. Oh yeah, cool. I was in Gwar too. You were in fucking Gwar. Like that's the one thing that is always. We did, we toured with the Foo Fighters. Rise Against did, and I just flippantly said that, and Dave Grohl was like, "Holy shit, you were in fucking Gwar!" And then me and him are just watching Gwar YouTube videos for like an hour. So it's just the one. It's the great sort of conversation piece,
Well, yeah. Did he say whether he saw them? Because Death Piggy, I guess, would have played with Death Piggy.
Holy shit, Death Piggy. A matter of fact, he told me that he was in line to audition for Gwar when they needed a drummer after the Hello record.
Wow.
Yeah, he said he was one of the guys because he's from Virginia.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking. What was Mission Impossible? No, was he in Lunchbox, or I always get which one he was in confused.
Shit, you know what, dude? You are fucking Yoda when it comes to this shit. So I don't, I'm just a Padawan. Fuck, dude, that is impressive. Death Piggy, that's crazy.
No, it's an unfortunate nerdy thing. I only met Dave one time, and he was in character. And it was, and it was, amazing getting to meet, Odorous and stuff but I really feel like that's one person that I never got to meet that I really love to have met.
Well, I'm sorry, I took a bite of something.
Do not worry. No, please. We've been going on for a long time.
God damn it. I thought I have it swallowed by the
I can go on. I can pontificate a little longer. I just I always feel bad when I'm in someone else's interview and I start going on a sort of monologue, and I'm like, wait, this is how it's supposed to work.
Now I'm good. He was the most interesting person I've ever met in my life.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
And I say that I would say that if he was alive right now.
Yeah.
I said that when he was alive. It was never like, oh yeah, I kind of hung out with Dave and whatever. It was anytime you hung out with him, had a conversation with him, you were better for it afterwards. That's not to say he wasn't frustrating, and he couldn't have been an asshole, and he couldn't have been, he couldn't have ruined your day, because he could definitely do that. But he was just an original, man. He was one of those people where, like Jello Biafra, or those people in this world that are like, the world is better because they're here. Mm-hmm. Dave Brockie was that guy. He was, you knew that was the only dude, that was the only Dave Brockie there ever will be. Yeah. I quit. Well, there was, being a straight edge kid, I never was a guy that, and still am not. I don't care what you do with yourself. It's my choice. Anybody else can do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
I was never that asshole that would knock a cigarette out of somebody's mouth or judge somebody. My parents had their addiction issues. And my mother still does. And so far be it from me to go, oh, you're an asshole because you do this. Well, Dave had his issues, and it's been widely reported, what his cause of death was. Mm-hmm. And that started rearing its head, that particular issue, when I was in the band. And the only time it really is like when it starts affecting the show. When it starts affecting the progress and the music and what we're all doing together, because this is my time. This is our time. Respect our time. And I sort of put it out there that this was making me unhappy. And I had nothing to go to, by the way. I was day job bound, but I knew this wasn't making me happy. I was feeling more and more ostracized because it's already a bit uncomfortable for me to be around heavy drug use. You know what I mean? Because it's just, I have a past history with familial history with it, not a personal history. and it's always made me feel uncomfortable. And but I could, for the sake of what we were all doing together, I guess, I was kind of trying to sort of kid myself and go, well, it's okay, it's okay. But then it started becoming an issue on stage. It started becoming an issue with productivity, and I was just like, dude, I see this happening, and you don't seem to be trying to do anything to correct this, and so I might have to leave. And I didn't see any change, and so I knew I wanted to do something that was a little more familiar to me,
Mm-hmm.
even if that meant starting a band from scratch. I just wanted to be in a punk band. I just wanted to do something that was like modest and earnest and from my heart. I, get back in a van, go sleep on floors. I do that for the rest of my fucking life. That's what I planned on doing, honestly. I never saw myself having kids and doing that sort of thing. I was like, this is just who I am. This is what I'm going to do. I'll be in bands the rest of my fucking life. And so this thing was now feeling so alien to me. And I didn't feel like we were all on the same page. And I didn't feel like I was a part of it. I mean, honestly. And we had just made a great record. We made a record called Violence Has Arrived, which I'm really, really proud of, and it was kind of a turn in direction for the band. The band had started making these sort of concept records that were real jokey and real thematic and real sort of theatrical. And my one thing that I did in Gwar was like, let's just make a fucking metal record. Let's just make a record that's about killing and pillaging and that's got cool riffs and there's no characters and there's no theme and there's no storyline. Let's just make a fucking cool metal record. And we did. And we were touring that, and that's when all the problems started. And I just said, I've got to go.
Yeah.
And I left. And much like my duct-taped, strung-together weird career, my brother and I had made a record called Armstrong with Brad from Gwar, who's probably one of the best drummers I've ever met, seen, played with. He's amazing. And he's a huge Descendants fan. So we made it's kind of like, I don't know if you've heard the Armstrong record.
No, I haven't.
It's kind of like Jawbreaker mixed with Descendants.
Oh.
Yeah, and I sang. It's a 3-piece. It was songs that I had for Hagfish that I'd just been kind of writing since I felt a little alienated from Gwar. It was like my attempt to kind of try to get back to what was sort of in me, like wasn't coming out otherwise. And Bill's label, Owned and Operated. Bill Stevenson had a label called Owned and Operated that put out a bunch of great bands, but he just never had the good distribution. And, he was always so busy with the studio and with his own bands. He never had, the ability to push these records and for people to hear them the way they were supposed to. But there was that band Wretch Like Me, a band called Someday I, a band called Tanger. And he put out a Shiner. Yeah, Tanger were great. He put out a Shiner record called Starless, which I loved Shiner.
Yeah.
And he put out our record, and it was called Armstrong. And I was like, man, this is going to have to start at zero, but I'd rather do that. That's where my heart is right now. So I'm going to leave this band and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it started at fucking zero. I mean, we were touring in a Chevy Cavalier, my brother's car, because we went and toured with All. But we were using All's backline, touring in a fucking Chevy Cavalier. That was 2 months after quitting Gwar, and playing packed houses, touring in a bus, doing all that stuff. Now I'm in a Chevy Cavalier and I'm sleeping on floors, and I'm with serious maggots on the floor and shit. We went all the way back to square one.
Yeah.
But during that, Russ Rankin from Good Riddance, he called me, much like Dave Brocky had called me before. He called me and was like, dude, I want to start a band. Good Riddance has taken a little bit of a break. And I don't want to necessarily start a straight edge band, but I want to start a band with guys that don't drink, smoke, or do drugs. We're not going to be known as a straight edge band, but I just would rather deal with guys that are on the same page like that. And he was like, I barely knew Russ. He was like, I hear that you're that guy, and I would like to see if you'd like to do this. And I was blown away.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck yeah, because I liked Good Riddance, and I think Russ has a great, one of the great punk rock voices, great delivery, just, and so I brought my brother in, who was the bass player for Hagfish, also a guy that did not drink, smoke, or do drugs. He had Aaron from Bane already, because Bane had toured with Good Riddance, and Bane were kind of going to be taking a break. And we were set to go. At first, it was Pete from Bane, actually, the bass player, too. Then Pete ended up not being able to do it, and I was able to get my brother.
Oh, and then Pete's not in Bane anymore, right?
No, he's not. He's not. He left Bane shortly after that.
Yeah, he was such a nice dude. Like I haven't seen him in years, but like I remember meeting him for the first time when I was roading for the Swarm, and I was like, this guy is so nice.
Dude, he's salt of the earth, man. Yeah. He's like the nicest fucking guy in the world. I loved Pete. Loved him. Big smile. Great dude.
Yeah, big smile.
Big smile. A winning smile, Bill calls it. Well, Bill, lo and behold, at this point, was like, wow, Russ and Zach are going to play in a band together. He didn't know Aaron Dahlbeck. He was like, at this point, he was kind of itching to play. All weren't playing at all. They weren't touring at all. And this is before Descendants had gotten back together. They had done that Cold to Be You record, but they didn't tour it at all.
They did that one tour with it, with Swingin' Utters and Bouncing Souls.
Oh, that's right. That's right. This was like 93, 94. So he wasn't, 2003, 2004.
Oh, and they also did the Warped Tour. Descendants did the Warped Tour one year.
That's right. That's right.
Did you guys do the Warped Tour? Hagfish?
No, we didn't.
That must have been was that like, I'm sorry, not to bring it back to a place.
Go for it.
But like, was that, because that would have seemed like, especially at that point, was such like a big maker of bands.
Oh, dude. And that was...
Was it hard? Would you try to get on that? Was there like a thing to try and get on it, or no?
You remember in the 90s, the Warped Tour was amazing.
Oh, it was incredible.
It was eclectic. We would have loved to have done the Warped Tour, but Hagfish was the product of a bunch of bad decisions, you know, and a bunch of missed opportunities. Like, I think we were slowing to a halt when Warped Tour started, which I guess was their first year was like 96, maybe 97.
96, yeah.
Yeah, so that was pretty much when we were dying. So, just another missed opportunity. And that would have been great for us. It probably would have breathed new life into us. We probably would, well, anyway,
sorry, not to digress. We're talking about Only Crime.
Please digress, because I'm gonna, if you want to hear all this shit, that's fucking.
No,
I want to tell
this is awesome. This is exactly what it's meant to be. As long as you got the time,
I got the time.
Eventually, I'm gonna have to take off because we're gonna go see Hotel Transylvania 2 this evening.
I saw it.
Is it good?
And it's very good.
Oh, good, excellent.
I thought the first one was great.
I like the first one too.
Yeah,
I would love to go and see. Something a little more adult, but tonight it's with the kids, so it's...
Well, Mel Brooks is in this one, so...
that's awesome.
Yeah. So, not to be a spoiler, but...
Shout out to Young Frankenstein with the...
Exactly! Exactly. Me and you, Damian. Boy,
we're on the same page, buddy. This is why we're going to be,
we gotta,
hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I know, we got to start a hardcore band and take the world over.
Exactly.
It'll
be like the Rastafari, or not Rastafari, sorry, I shouldn't say that, that's probably... It's like the stoner meets straight edge project the world has been waiting for.
Exactly. That would be fucking it'll take over.
Exactly.
So okay, I'll wrap it up. So
no, please.
Only Crime. So Bill was like, dude, I would like to play in this band. I want to get out of the studio. I'm itching to go play again. I don't care that we'll be starting over, with the names involved. It could Fat Mike might put it out, and maybe it could, whatever. We could start touring. So we were thrilled, holy shit, this would be Bill Stevenson's fourth band. It would be Black Flag, The Descendants, all, and this, And so Bill was has always been my mentor. I mean, since I was a little kid, he's been the guiding light of my career. He's been everything.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't stop there, So we all got together, and it was rad. It was fucking rad. We had this idea to kind of Bill's era of Black Flag, even though Bill isn't a huge fan of his own era of Black Flag, he's more of a fan of the Robo era of Black, like the early Des Cadena Damaged era. We were kind of starting to do that, heavier riffs and all that stuff. And so the idea was awesome. And fortunately, Fat Mike gave it a home, which I owe that guy so much as well. And we were off. We started touring. We weren't able to go consistently because Bill still had his studio and he was still, making a living doing that. But it was playing with my brother again, and I fell in love with Aaron Dahlbeck, and he's just an amazing guy. And Russ, it was awesome to work with Russ, and we were writing cool shit. And we put out the first record. It's called To the Nines, and did a portion of the Warped Tour, which was awesome. This was. Oh, sorry. Go.
Yeah, no problem. So, Zach, thanks so much for coming on the show, because now I do have to go to see Hotel Transylvania Part 2, but we'll continue about Only Crime, and I want to hear, because also you guys did a tour with Alexa on Fire, and one of my best friends in the world, Chris O'Toole, was the merch guy on that tour, and
shit,
there's a lot of funny stories that I'm sure to talk about. Also, we didn't even get to Rise Against. You know?
Yeah, right. The one, like my career defining moment.
Well, no, I was going to say, I would, we did an hour about Hagfish, which is the Turned Out a Punk Way.
This is fucking that. Man, Damian, seriously, because of guys like you, that's what makes this whole thing so amazing and awesome, that you would even, care, because it's still such a soft spot in my heart, and I really appreciate it. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to go on about that.
No, Zach, honestly, and we will probably also have it come up again in Part 2, but we will come back for a Part 2 very soon, because now we're going to start doing the Part 2s on the regular, and have you, go into, joining probably arguably the biggest punk band of this past decade, one of the biggest punk bands of the past decade. So, a huge thing to get into next time. So,
okay. I can't wait, man. I'm stoked. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Zach.
All right. Take care, buddy.